I think is a boiler, and if it is a boiler, it's not a coincidence that it looks like a bomb. This is a boiler, and it's a cool boiler. You see in here a bunch of tubes, columns. These are for keeping the water and the air separate. One way that you can heat a tank of water is just like a kettle. You set a kettle on a fire. There's your boiler. Another way that you could do it that's more efficient, this is what we would call a heat exchanger now, is you try to maximize how much of the heat from the coal is getting absorbed into the water. One thing that's interesting to me about profit motive is that it tries to optimize for efficiency. And a lot of times it's awesome. In this particular case, what we're optimizing for is the minimum amount of fuel used for the maximum amount of work done. The work done in the case of factories, in terms of its outputs that consumers will then be able to use, is a good thing. That's why we're all rich. That's why you're able to watch this on the internet. For that good gains of the energy provided, of the stuff moved, of the things made, it's using less and less and less fuel, which if you're into reducing carbon emissions, they were way ahead of. That's kind of a cool thing. If you think about boilers, they are pressure vessels, right? They are filled with pressure that's all being held in by these plates of iron that are kind of riveted together. And making a pressure vessel, or really a watertight vessel using the riveted technique, is not easy. And trying to get all these sheets, which you've forged to be of even thickness all the way around and perfectly strong, that's also not easy. There were a lot of accidents. As you fill this thing with pressure that's designed to push cylinders back and forth, if one of the rivets wasn't quite right, or if one of the plates wasn't quite perfect, or if it's rusted a little bit on the inside, then boom, it can kill whoever's standing next to it. Yeah, that of course is a terrible thing, and it got a lot of engineers thinking. One of the solutions is to have the pipes, which I showed you before. Keep it separate, keep it contained. Another solution is, just to over-engineer the crud out of this thing, because you really don't want that to happen. No one wants that to happen. The guy working next to it doesn't want it to happen. The guy who owns it doesn't want it to happen. The guy who's paying both the guy who's standing next to it and for this thing doesn't want it to happen. And so there's lots of minds and lots of incentives interlinking to try to stop a bad thing from happening. As a blacksmith, I'm trying to imagine making one of these, or really any watertight vessel. The idea of like a cauldron that you do all your cooking in movies, that's what you see is a big metal cauldron. But for a lot of human history, like a lot, clear up into the Middle Ages, the average family is more likely to have something made of ceramic, which is why we think of cooking pots as being pots and not cooking steel enclosed watertight vessels. These particular ones, with their panel construction, show you a little bit more of the problem, a little bit more of this, any one of those goes out and it could shoot out like a missile. The power of steam is enormous, and it could be enormously good for getting work done. But it's an enormous amount of power, and controlling it, channeling it, making sure that you use the most of it that you can and that it goes in the right places and not in the wrong places. I am the wrong place for the steam power to go, is a challenge. And I'm grateful that we overcame that. I'm grateful that people like Robert Stirling came up with the Stirling engine. We're thinking about these problems and developing ways for us to transform the world. There's something off there.
Man, what are we doing when you do technology? Are we transforming the world, or what are we aiming at exactly? I mean, quality, but cheaper stuff.
Cheaper stuff. It's
I mean,
all about cheaper stuff, man.
Well, hard to argue with that.
You want to make some things cheaper and some things more expensive. The goal is to make the human life more expensive than anything else.
Is that, holy crap, if that's true, that's a big deal.
I can't help but notice that there's a parallel between efficiency in terms of machines, and efficiency is always about maximizing one thing and then not maximizing the other things, right? You're concentrating all of your efforts into maximizing one thing. In the case of a boiler, one thing you're maximizing is your thermal efficiency. You want to get as much energy out of the coal as possible, but you're also optimizing for other things, like not having horrible accidents. One thought that I had recently about economics is that it's all about making everything cheaper. We want to make everything cheaper because by comparison that makes us richer. But one thing that you don't want to make cheaper is human life. you want to make that as expensive as you possibly can, as precious as you possibly can. And by making everything else cheaper and making everyone richer and lifting people out of poverty and making life better for people so they can live longer, healthier, happier, that's wonderful. I guess that's the game. We get it wrong when we make human life cheaper as well. If you enjoyed this video, which is more or less a mixture of a video about stuff and technology and also a video about ideas and the stuff that the stuff represents, then please hit the like button and subscribe below for more content similarly good and basic.
Sounds like he's having a lot of fun. I don't think he's optimizing for fuel efficiency, though.
I would say not, but he might be optimizing for things slightly more important.
Maybe.
You know, it depends on how often you do it.